Hello, and welcome back to Listen Bro, a podcast with two brothers telling each other stories and getting live reactions. I'm going to go first this week.
You're not going to
Ethan.
tell me who you are.
Oh, no, I'm Joe. Sorry.
And I'm Ethan.
Yep. Ethan, true or false? AI, their data centers are taking up tons of fresh water to keep them cool
That has to
and
be true.
essentially wasting.
Has to be true.
Kind of, yeah, like it is technically true. They are using up a lot of water,
You say
but
wasting? I don't know.
people say it's being wasted.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That part's not true because it will come back down in rain. It's just it will change climates in some areas slightly because of how
Sure.
much extra evaporation.
So what are they? I guess you're going to tell me. Go ahead.
So, the reason it's only partially true though is because yes, they're using a lot. Like if you just look at the numbers, one data center is using 5 million gallons per day.
Holy cow.
It's one of the largest data centers in this
5?
country, but 5 million gallons of water per day.
Holy cow.
And that's supposed to equal like a town of 50,000 people.
Wow. Roughly equivalent to 7.5 Olympic sized swimming pools.
Holy cow.
Oh.
That is big. But that is a lot of water. But when you start comparing, they use about as much water as what YouTube's storage looks like. Like
Oh,
YouTube's
really?
data center uses almost the same, like they're a little bit higher, but people are making it out to be so much worse.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's just like it is higher, I will admit, but it's not enough higher that I feel like it's something major to worry about. Because like, set up another data center for another big company, and okay, there you go, you're back at it.
Right. And I guess maybe part of the concern there would be like AI is exploding.
Yeah.
So there are
Yep.
tons of data centers being built.
Yep. That's what it is. It is kind of concerning is that it that number has gone up drastically since AI has started taking off. But there are different types of cooling that they can use.
Yeah.
And I don't know why more people don't do one of these, but I'll get to it here in a little bit. Obviously, there's air cooling
Mm-hmm.
by just blowing a fan across it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
There's open loop cooling, which is what they're doing. So they're pulling water from out and then sending it through the pipes and then sending it back out. There's closed loop, which is a pump in a reservoir that just recycles the same water.
Yeah.
And then there's free cooling. And free cooling is when you build the data center in a cold environment and just
Oh.
leave more of it open to the elements, kind of. Why don't they do that one?
Probably because of the distance.
Uh, yeah, I guess because it probably cost a lot more to run the wiring the whole way down.
Yeah, I mean there's already infrastructure for some of that though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean that would make sense though.
Yep. But they say medium sized data centers, like slightly smaller than that one, will use around like 100 million gallons a year. So like the numbers aren't crazy off,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's something that a lot of people are actually very worried about because they think it's going to affect a lot of the environment and stuff, and like I said, wasting
Mm-hmm.
fresh water.
Well, so are they using that open loop cooling?
Yes. Yep. So they're
Yeah.
but they can't put it back out into like the environment. So what they're doing is they're tapping off of like rivers or
Mm-hmm.
drilling down and using groundwater,
Mm-hmm.
but they can't just send it back into the environment because it's contaminated by the end. So they have to take it and basically like not sewage but like wastewater things,
Mm-hmm.
wastewater places,
Yeah,
which
treatment.
I feel like those wouldn't it evaporate out and you'd get
Yeah,
clean
I
water back, or would that be like that acid rain stuff?
Well, that would definitely be part of it. I know like acid rain is a bigger deal in places with,
Cities and infrastructure, right?
well, and it's not just a city. Think like Pittsburgh, Steeltown, coal areas.
Yeah.
They're
Okay.
burning a lot.
Yeah.
The processes are creating gases and all that.
Yeah.
Coke plants. And those facilities would contaminate the air to where you'd have the acid rain. But if it's like pulled up on the ground and evaporating, I don't know.
Yeah.
Wonder why aren't they using closed loop?
Because it gets the water too hot. It would be like an unreasonable amount of cost in fuel and in like building a tank to hold the water because they would need so much. So what they're doing then, the places that do have like an actual tank with fuel,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of fuel they burn is just outrageous.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would assume closed loop, like, yeah, you might need a large quantity of water for that to be sustainable, but that's like once it's built,
Yeah.
then the amount of water you'd go through would be much smaller.
Yeah. Yep. Which I mean, you could kind of use air cooling to cool the water reservoir
Right. Yeah.
too. So,
Yeah. Or ground,
yeah.
like once you dig down underground, it's cold,
Yeah. Yep.
like 50 degrees or something like that down there.
Yeah, I don't know why they don't use that more. That
Huh.
feels like it would make the most sense.
You should just start building data centers in caves
Yeah.
where it's cool, natural, free cooling, or whatever you said it was
Yeah.
called.
Yep, free cooling.
Hmm.
Yep. That's the one of the free cooling one. I wonder, I didn't look into that part, but like I wonder what the difference would be in price for
Yeah.
like if they would run it down from it up in Canada or something.
Right. Yeah.
But then I guess it'd be a whole like contract issues with going cross borders of countries.
Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting. I get. I just don't know the industry enough. You don't
Yeah.
either. I mean, we don't work in those fields,
Yeah.
but
Yep. But a lot of people are actually starting to transfer to using their own home servers
right.
as well now. Like it's a higher demand for that than ever before because people want to be more like
Yeah.
self-sufficient in ways,
Mm-hmm.
so you're not relying on the big Google
Yeah.
Drive to hold all your stuff. But
Yeah. Well, there's a
those things are
big
expensive to set up though.
right. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about those either. I know people take like old computers and
Yeah. Yep.
use them to set
They're
up.
they're now making like some companies are making a one piece thing that's like your computer that runs it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like a simple slow running computer, but it's all you really need.
Yeah.
And it has like a timer set into it so that way if the power blinks for up to 5 minutes, I think it is, it won't stop your server from working,
Hmm.
because once it crashes it kind of becomes an issue.
Right.
I forget where I was going with that.
Yeah.
But they they then have like slots that you can insert your storage, and like you can buy 12 terabyte discs
Right.
or
Yeah.
however big of discs and insert into those.
Yeah.
And like you have to have one set up to be able to have one die and have its stuff transferred to another one before it does die.
Right.
Like it's a whole upkeep thing. It's like I
Yeah.
don't know if I want that hassle though.
Well, how long would it last though?
I don't know, but they make it sound like it's a common thing that you better have it
Yeah.
set up like this whenever they die
Hmm.
or whenever they get corrupted, I think is what it actually is.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yep. So that was mine. So I
All
want to
right.
hear more about the American Revolution.
Yeah. I have a confession to make.
Okay.
Remember how last time I said I have a confession to make, and I said I told you I was going to get through the entire American Revolution.
Yeah.
Okay, this time I am getting through to the end of the war. That is happening.
Okay.
But I'm not sure that I'm moving on from the war yet, because this is just overview.
Okay.
I might go back and hit some little side stories, details, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so when we left off last time, you had the Battle of Bunker Hill, just outside of
Yes.
Boston. Technically a British victory, but an American morale boost.
Oh, yeah.
And then we have George Washington appointed as commander-in-chief, and he takes command. That's basically where we left it off. And then the king refuses the olive branch petition.
Yeah. Which this is like beginning of the war still.
Yes, this is 1775.
Yeah.
Middle of the year, talking July when George Washington takes command, August when the king refuses the olive branch petition. So let's get into it. The Second Continental Congress, so they would actually be in session until 1781. This would run for years.
Okay.
And it ended in 1781 when the Articles of Confederation were ratified, which created the Congress of the Confederation. So they didn't, it didn't go away, it changed. And during this period, Continental Congress acted as the colonial government. They would issue currency, they managed the war effort, they would write the Declaration of Independence after the King of England refused their attempts at reconciliation. They conducted foreign diplomacy and wrote the Articles of Confederation, which is basically America's first attempt at a constitution.
Okay.
They were coming up with, we've declared ourselves independent in the Declaration of Independence. We need to come up with a form of government. That's what the Articles of Confederation was.
Okay.
So basically, though, the Second Continental Congress was America's first government.
Okay. I never knew that.
Yeah, so they just act as the government while the war is going on until they set up the Articles of Confederation, in which creates the Congress of the Confederation, which would run until they actually wrote the U.S. Constitution, which was ratified in 1789. So it would be a few years. I mean, the Articles of Confederation only stood up from 1781 to 89. So, it didn't really work, but we'll talk about that later in a different episode. Okay, so George Washington, after he takes command of the Continental Army, they were facing shortages. And I talked about that previously, how they were running out of gunpowder and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the army was low. Big things were gunpowder and bullets. They had, food supplies could be got off the land in to some degree, at least.
Yeah.
They had the British in Boston locked in on every side by land, but the British were being resupplied by sea. So in August of 1775, George Washington corresponded with the Provincial Congress of Massachusetts. This would be like the state government. He talked to them about outfitting ships, turning them into warships to capture British transports. So George Washington authorized Army funds to modify ships and gave command of these ships to Army officers and supplied Army detachments to man the ships.
Okay.
The first of these orders was issued to Captain Nicholas Brockton on September 2nd, 1775. So only 2 months after he's in command. He is issuing orders to a ship captain.
Mm-hmm.
Captain Brockton successfully captured the British ship called Unity on September 7th, just 5 days later. And that ship was bound for Boston, and it was filled with naval supplies and lumber. It was like, bingo.
Yep.
This is going to work. We're going to actually be able to get some supplies this way. Washington's naval success, and he did this with a couple other ships. It wasn't just that one, but it was a little bit slow at the beginning. They had 2 ships, and then a little while later they'd get a few more. But Washington's naval success stimulated congressional action. So in October 1775, Congress authorized the fitment of naval ships and appointed a naval committee, basically creating the Continental Navy.
Okay.
And this, I mentioned Congress there, this basically ends my coverage of the Second Continental Congress. We will talk about them when I go over the founding documents in a later episode. But for now, just know that is all happening. They're doing stuff in the background until 1781. and the war is going on. So back to Boston. We briefly mentioned in the last episode the siege of Boston.
Okay.
Washington and his army had Boston surrounded. British General Howe, however, had failed to fortify Dorchester Heights, which is on the south side of Boston.
Okay.
Washington ordered Henry Knox, and I briefly mentioned this in the last episode, but
I was going to
Washington,
say, I remember the name, but I couldn't remember much with him.
He ordered Henry Knox to retrieve the cannons from Fort Ticonderoga, and then they used those cannons to fortify Dorchester Heights.
Yeah.
On the night of March 4th, 1776, George Washington strategically used cannon fire to cover the sound of 2,000 men using hammers and picks and the clatter of wagons dragging cannons up the hill. By morning, one night, General Howe found himself at great risk. The Patriot fortification on Dorchester Heights gave them a clear shot to every British ship in the Boston harbor.
Oh.
They were not now free on the seaside. Because before they were surrounded by soldiers on the land side of Boston, but they were totally free moving in and out of the water.
Yep.
Now, not so much.
Yep.
So, General Howe wanted to attack, but his soldiers there in Boston, they kind of remembered what happened at Bunker Hill. He sent Lord Percy, another British officer, with 3,000 men to take out the Americans. But a heavy storm rolled in, prevented the attack. This led to George Washington and General Howe making an agreement. The Patriots would hold their fire while General Howe and the British soldiers evacuated Boston. On March 17th, Howe and nearly, get this, how many soldiers they had? 9,000 men.
9,000
in Boston. They boarded 78 vessels on the water to depart. And in departing, they were kind of, in haste. They tried to destroy anything that would be of value to the Continental Army on their way out, but they ended up leaving behind about 250 cannons and a crap load of ammunition.
Oh, my.
And remember, this is back in the 1770s. News traveled kind of slow to reach London.
Yeah.
So because it would take several weeks to inform London that the army had moved, British ships continued sailing into Boston to resupply the British army, not knowing that it was now held by the Patriots.
Yeah.
So they basically...
Yeah, you can't just ride by the other ships and put your window down and tell them, hey.
Right. Well, and you think the news would have to reach London.
Yep.
And they'd then have to change the routes of future shipments, but you'd already have ships out.
Yep. And what are you going to do about them?
Probably a couple months worth of ships rolling in.
Mm-hmm.
So, pretty big deal that they took the Dorchester Heights. This is
got a lot of resources from that.
Right. This is what ended the siege of Boston, pushed the British out of Boston entirely.
I cannot believe they pushed 9,000 out.
Isn't that crazy?
Of what was supposed to be the greatest army.
Yeah. So, very big win. They got a lot of supplies from it. This would keep the army going. Now, not everything, though, was going well for the Patriots.
When is it?
By winter of 1776, so just, 6 months later, 9 months later, the Americans had lost several battles, and they had retreated across the Delaware River into Pennsylvania. The winter weather drastically slowed the fighting, but it was also very hard on the soldiers. Lack of food, lack of supplies, and enlistments were set to expire. But Washington had a plan. He asked his soldiers to stick around for one more fight before ending their enlistment.
Mm-hmm.
On Christmas night, 1776, George Washington and his army crossed the frigid Delaware River into New Jersey. This is that famous painting.
It's on the back of a coin, too, right? On the back of a quarter, I think.
It might be. I don't know, to be honest. It might be. This is the famous painting of George Washington standing up in the ship, or standing up in the little boat, paddling across the river. So they crossed the water into New Jersey and then marched 10 miles to reach Trenton. A winter storm had rolled in during this night, preventing 2 whole portions of the army from crossing the river. This was planned to be a 3-pronged attack, and 2 of the prongs were not there.
Ooh.
They arrive at Trenton around daybreak on October 26th. Wow, October, why did I say that? December 26th. Christmas.
I was going to say, I thought it was Christmas.
Yeah. They arrive at Trenton around daybreak on December 26th.
Okay.
Washington splits his force into 2. So he's already down to a third of what he planned. He splits that in 2. He leaves one half under the command of Major General Nathaniel Greene. The other half he leaves under the command of Major General John Sullivan.
I don't remember Sullivan.
In Trenton, there was a Hessian camp. The Hessians were German soldiers hired by the British.
Yeah. Mercenaries.
Yep. General Greene would attack the camp from the north. General Sullivan would attack the west and cut off the line of retreat to the south. The Hessians were caught completely off guard, and Hessian commander Johann Rall surrendered. Only 5 Americans were wounded, and for the Hessians, 22 were killed, 83 wounded, and around 800 either missing or captured.
Wow.
Only 10 days later, early January, Washington's army crossed the Delaware again, and they move across New Jersey, and they encounter British troops. And these British troops were on their way from Princeton to reinforce British General Cornwallis in Trenton, where they had just attacked the Hessians. So the Hessians surrender, but Cornwallis is in there now. And we'll talk about Cornwallis quite a bit later. But they're basically, this is a classic 2 armies just happen to be traveling the same road, running each other. You know, not a planned battle, not a planned attack. The British army gained an advantage initially, but Washington personally led troops into the line of fire, which for a guy of his rank be a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
You know, he's appointing other generals to lead troops and execute his plans. So for him to personally lead troops into the line of fire, and this would be like one of the things George Washington is known for is his leadership, and this would be a very big way to rally your guys. Like, oh shoot, George Washington's here.
Yep.
And he's out front.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But he leads his troops into the line of fire, and they pretty much surround the 450-man British regiment. The British retreated, marking another victory for Washington. And these, like I said, these 2 battles were 10 days apart. These are called the 10 crucial days in the war.
Okay.
And once again, the Patriots demonstrated their abilities against the powerful British Army. 2 victories in 10 days. And these 2 victories would bolster morale and the support for the American cause.
Yeah.
All right. So fast forward a little bit. In 1777, the next year, or the same year, I guess, because that was into early January.
Yeah.
The British Army wanted to gain control of New York. General Burgoyne was moving south from Canada with 7,500 men, British general. By August, he had recaptured Fort Ticonderoga for the British and Fort Edward. Both of these forts were right along the critical waterways running north and south through that area. They were, if you remember, I said in the last episode, Fort Ticonderoga was a big point along the route between Albany and Montreal. Fort Edward was right along the Hudson River. So both of these big high-traffic areas. Burgoyne's army suffered a defeat in the Battle of Bennington and marched south towards Saratoga in early September 1777. American General Horatio Gates, who was one of the guys considered for the role that was given to George Washington. Horatio Gates and his soldiers built fortifications on an area called Bemis Heights, which was just south of Saratoga, and it was overlooking the Hudson River. Now, Burgoyne's army was moving into Saratoga. So the 2 armies clash on September 19th, And the British held their position but suffered tremendous loss, and
Mm.
Burgoyne's forces dug in, literally, digging trenches, waiting for reinforcements. So they're just waiting, sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
Food supplies were dwindling, and the British troops were cut to half rations, which is not what you want to do when you're trying to fight.
Yeah. Make you weak.
General Burgoyne launched a second attack on October 7th, but General Benedict Arnold was riding out front leading American soldiers. This was another defeat for the British Army. Burgoyne's army surrendered on October 17th.
Mm.
Horatio Gates, the general on the American side, he gains a lot of popularity from this victory, and he actually campaigned for a bit to replace George Washington, but that didn't happen.
Yeah.
The British Army all became prisoners of war, and General Burgoyne, British commander there,
Mm-hmm.
he is sent back to England,
Really?
and he is never given command in the British Army again. Yeah.
Ho, ho, ho.
But here's the thing. The most important outcome of this battle, the Battle of Saratoga, is it directly influenced France deciding to ally with America.
Okay.
A diplomatic party sent from Congress, remember I said how they were doing that?
Yeah.
That diplomatic party included Benjamin Franklin. He is a big part of, I think he was like basically the ambassador
Okay.
to France. But he had negotiated a treaty that provided French support to the colonies. And this went both ways. The colonies agreed that if England would attack France, the colonies would support France. And both sides agreed that neither France nor the United States would make peace with England until England recognized the independence of the United States. So
Yeah.
now they had French support. This is
They have a whole
big deal.
army on their side.
Not just an army, a whole country.
Yeah.
An established country with money. Money is a big thing. Money, people, weapons, all of it. Now, France was first, but eventually the Spanish and Dutch would also support the United States in the war, and all of these nations were motivated to weaken the British domination in Europe. So, a few years later, in the spring of 1781, I know we skipped a few years there, but spring of 1781, former American General Benedict Arnold, he changed sides.
Oh,
He's a traitor. He
well, darn him
led.
anyways.
He didn't just go into the British and give them information. He personally led British troops into Virginia and captured Richmond. He combined forces with General William Phillips, and they burned tobacco warehouses in Petersburg. And the two armies waited for General Cornwallis, who is on his way up to Virginia from North Carolina. And then at this time, when they all meet up, Benedict Arnold goes back to New York, where there's a British general, and the whole army there is under the command of General Cornwallis. That other general, William Phillips, died 2 days before Cornwallis got there. So you have this big army now, Cornwallis in Virginia. Henry Clinton, this was the commander-in-chief of the British forces, like the George Washington of the British forces at this time.
Okay.
He had learned there was a French fleet sailing up from the Caribbean. Clinton feared they were headed to New York, where he was operating.
Yeah.
That's kind of their base of operations. He ordered Cornwallis down in Virginia to fortify a deep water port. Deep water port meaning you could get ships into it.
Okay.
And he told him, fortify a deep water port and wait for further instructions. So by August 6th, Cornwallis's army had begun fortifying Yorktown, Virginia.
Okay.
George Washington was in the Hudson River Valley in New York, just north of New York City. And he wanted to attack Henry Clinton's army there. But his French allies continuously advised against it. They're too strong there. It's not a good idea. At this point, Congress was low on money, and they were not able to pay the troops anymore. There had actually been mutinies among the troops already.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But Washington receives news through his French allies that the French fleet coming up from the Caribbean, It had 29 warships, and they were preparing to enter the Chesapeake Bay. And I believe that the French commander working with Washington kind of went behind his back and told the fleet, like, hey, go to Chesapeake Bay. I'm trying to convince him to go to Virginia. So he does. He agrees. He goes to Virginia. So he sends orders down to Virginia to Lafayette, who we haven't talked about at all yet. French
But
guy
the name
came
is
over to
very
fight.
familiar.
Name is very familiar. There's Fayettes all over the place in the United States.
Yep.
All named after him. But Lafayette was commanding an army in Virginia. Washington sent orders to him, basically said, don't let Cornwallis leave. Just keep him pinned down in Virginia.
Yeah.
On August 19th, George Washington marches 3,000 American troops, along with 4,000 French troops, headed south. 7,000, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
When passing New York City, he split his army into 3 columns.
Okay.
He also sent troops to set up a camp in New Jersey. He was hoping this would give the appearance that they were setting up for an attack on New York.
Okay.
On September 14th, after nearly a month, Washington's army reached Williamsburg, Virginia. The French fleet had already landed, and they added an additional 3,000 French soldiers from that fleet.
Dang.
Yeah.
So that's 10,000?
Yeah. Now, a few days, like a week before Washington got there, on September 5th, Cornwallis, remember, he's fortified there in Yorktown. 19 British ships approached the Chesapeake to resupply Cornwallis. The French fleet is already there. So they attack. And they badly damaged the British ships. 5 days later, the French fleet was reinforced with fresh ships. This caused the British fleet to withdraw, and they flee to New York for repairs. Cornwallis did not get resupplied. And now the French securely held the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah.
Nobody was getting in. So
That's
Washington
huge.
arrives. Yeah. Washington arrives with his troops, and the American and French troops begin laying siege on Yorktown on September 28th. And you
Okay.
have artillery, cannon stuff being fired for nearly a week. A little bit later, October 14th, it's about 2.5 weeks into this fight, there's a lieutenant colonel. Who have you been waiting to come up? You mentioned last week.
Oh, Hamilton.
Yeah. On October 14th, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Hamilton
Yeah.
leads troops on an attack. Now, this is kind of like Ticonderoga. Remember how they wanted to go in under the cover of darkness, maintain element of surprise? Well, they wanted the element of surprise here. So what they do is they fix bayonets to their weapons, and they don't load the weapons. They don't load them. They don't charge them.
Oh, they're going to get close and personal.
But this will make sure nobody fires a shot. It's going to stay quiet.
Yeah.
The British completely overwhelmed by Alexander Hamilton's force. The next day, General Cornwallis orders a counterattack, and that failed miserably. The morning of October 17th, 1781, a British drummer approaches with a British officer waving a white handkerchief on the end of a sword. The British are seeking honorable terms of surrender. Washington says no way. See, the British had denied honorable surrender to American forces earlier in the war. Washington's like, no, you're not getting away with that.
Yeah.
This is it. This is the end. This marks the beginning of the end of the war. You might say, why does it the beginning of the end? Well, this was 1781.
Yeah. It's already been going on.
It's already been going on for a while.
6 years?
Yeah, 1775 when it started. So, yeah, you're a good 6.5 years in now. On March 5th, 1782, just a few months later, Parliament in England passes a bill authorizing the British government to make peace with America. But the war wasn't officially over until 1783.
Yeah.
In fact, it wasn't until September of 1783. So you're still a year and a half away. Which is why I say Yorktown beginning of the end, because it would still take 2 years.
Yeah.
But in 1783, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and John Jay negotiate on behalf of the United States in Paris, securing 2 things. 1, British recognition of the independence of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this was all. That's the only way this would end.
Yeah.
And second, delineating boundaries in North America that would allow for American westward expansion.
Mm-hmm.
So this treaty, the Treaty of Paris, which might sound familiar because the French and Indian War, 7 Years' War, also ended with a Treaty of Paris. But this is a new Treaty of Paris. This was signed on September 3rd, 1783. And it wasn't just the U.S. and England. It was the U.S., France, Spain, the Dutch,
Yeah.
and England. There were a lot of nations involved here.
That's crazy.
And they were, you take this baby of a nation and you have John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and John Jay negotiating on the world stage, and they get what they want.
Yeah.
Now, it was finally signed, Treaty of Paris, September 3rd, 1783. So this is almost 2 full years after Yorktown.
Yeah.
There were some skirmishes in those 2 years, but the war was effectively over with the American and French victory in the Battle of Yorktown.
Yeah.
In that same year, 1783, on December 23rd, George Washington addressed Congress in person, delivering his resignation. He had been commander-in-chief for the entirety of the war.
Yeah.
The British Army, they had gone through 4 commanders-in-chief. And then this is the end of the war. Like I said, I got through it. Look at that. But that's just the highlights. Those are like the top 5 critical battles. You have Lexington and Concord, the Battle of Bunker Hill. Then you have the Battle of Trenton, which also kind of includes the Battle of Princeton, those 10 crucial days.
Yeah.
And you have Saratoga, and then, of course, Yorktown.
Yeah.
All of those are American, if not victories, at least good battles for the Americans.
Boosters. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is plenty that was not good. They had like a winter at Valley Forge, which was just brutal. So, it's not all rainbows and butterflies for the Americans throughout the war. They had their struggles. But remember how I said, I should have mentioned this earlier. Remember how I said George Washington was moving troops down past New York City, and he told some troops to go build an encampment over there to make it look like we're about to attack New York City?
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah.
You might, just think about this for a second. You're George Washington. You're in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
You have 7,000 troops that you want to get to Virginia, but you don't want the British to know you're moving 7,000 troops to Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
How in the world do you sneak 7,000 troops anywhere?
Yeah.
But he did. He threw them off.
Yep.
He threw them off with that. The British saw Henry Clinton in New York, saw the encampment being built and saw British troops moving and assumed they were moving to be in position for whatever they had planned to attack New York. So it worked.
Yeah.
Crazy. I made a list here of notable figures in this war that I didn't really talk about. I may have mentioned their names, but didn't go into detail. First of all, you have Lafayette. Lafayette and George Washington were very good friends by the end of the war.
Yeah.
So much so that Lafayette named a son George Washington Lafayette.
Wow.
Lafayette's son. Now, later on, you have England and France at war. Or no, you have the French Revolution happens very shortly after the American Revolution. Lafayette plays a big part in that. He's like a freedom fighter.
Yeah.
He believed in the cause of independence. He joined the American fight before France officially joined. But Lafayette's son went to America during the French Revolution.
Really?
And this was while George Washington was president.
Okay. So the kid would be pretty young.
He was pretty young. Yeah, I think maybe a teenager.
Yeah.
America wasn't taking a side in that war. It's a French Revolution. It's France against France.
Yeah.
It's not France against England. So they weren't bound to that treaty. But America wasn't taking a side because they were still trying to recover from the revolution. But when Lafayette's Yeah, when Lafayette's son came to America, he lived with George Washington
Yeah.
when George Washington was president.
Hmm.
So like they
They
were
were close.
definitely friends. You know, like it wasn't like they just worked together well in the war. No, they remained friends. And George Washington was like concerned of the political implications of taking in Lafayette's son, but everybody was like, no, we get it. Like, you guys are friends. You're good.
Mm-hmm.
Another character, Nathaniel Greene, barely mentioned him, but he'd be interesting to cover further. Alexander Hamilton, very close with George Washington. Alexander Hamilton actually wanted to lead troops in battle, but he
Mm-hmm.
was basically George Washington's chief of staff. And George Washington was basically refusing to let him lead troops because he
Yeah.
was too valuable to Washington. Like if Washington sent letters to people, sent orders, Alexander Hamilton wrote most of those.
Yeah.
And he got to know George Washington so well that he would write them, and George Washington, like you wouldn't know that it wasn't George Washington.
Really?
The way he would say things, the things he would say, it was just like George Washington. Very trusted, and they would be very good friends as well during Washington's political career.
Yeah.
Another character you have is John Paul Jones, father of the Navy, sort of interesting character. Thomas Paine is a guy who wrote some articles that really stimulated the Americans to get behind the cause of the revolution.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Like the kind of propaganda side of it, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. Thomas Paine he wrote a pamphlet called Common Sense. It's a pretty well-known thing. Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense.
Okay.
Basically says, like, you need to get behind this cause.
Yeah.
And it was very widely distributed, very popular. Then you have Baron von Steuben. He's a French guy. Took part in the war. And then the last one I put on my list, because I figured it's probably worth mentioning and maybe worth another look in the future, is Benedict Arnold. I mentioned him with Ticonderoga.
The traitor.
Yep, I mentioned him a couple times. At the beginning of this episode, I mentioned him as an American. At the end of the episode, I mentioned him as a British general. So he is squirrely character, not a good guy by the end of it. But that is the American Revolution. If you want to hear the beginning of it, go to last week's episode, because I think it's pretty exciting. I also think my internet may have cut out, so Joe might not be able to hear anything I'm saying. So I'll just wrap this up. If you haven't yet, please give us a rating, leave a review, comment, and follow the podcast. We'll be back with another episode shortly and continue this saga of American history, might be in the Revolution, talking about some of these side characters a bit more.